Hi, this is Brett Ingram, award-winning entrepreneur, and today I want to share with you the weird, almost backward way to scale your entrepreneurial income. So as entrepreneurs, it's sort of human nature that, once we've gotten past the startup phase and we know we've got a going concern, we've got a business that actually can generate enough revenue to support us, to support itself, and to know that it looks like we're going to, make it, so to speak. So what ends up happening for every entrepreneur in that particular phase is the natural next thought is, how do we grow? How do we go from where we are? Okay, so we've proven our concept. We've proven our idea. We've tapped into our market. We've gotten some resonance there. People are excited about what we have to offer. They're willing to spend money to get our products and services, whatever it is. And so we know that we can generate enough revenue to cover our expenses and then some. And so it's a great feeling, and it's a great place to be when we first get that realization that we've gone from an idea that we had at one point and we've gotten it to a point where it actually can generate enough money to create a sustainable business and maybe create an even better lifestyle, or at least more freedom in our lifestyle than we would have had, and more control than we would have had if we were working for somebody else. So the next logical idea is we've got that, and what we want to do is, once it's making us money, even if our goal isn't world domination, the natural thought is, what do we do next? How do we grow it from here? How do we get from where we are, which we're happy about and excited about, but it certainly isn't sort of the mountaintop. We've gotten to where we wanted to be, and now we want to say, okay, let's look up from where we are, and how do we get to the next level? How do we get things above and beyond where we are right now? Well, the traditional thought, the traditional method, and the traditional idea, sort of the default, I guess, setting for this is, to look for ways to grow or scale what we're already doing. So regardless of what our business is, if we have a dog grooming business or an ice cream shop or a digital marketing company or an SEO, it doesn't really matter what it is we're doing. The first thing that we're going to look at is, how do we get more customers? How do we grow our base beyond what we're currently doing? So if we have a physical location somewhere, we might be able to expand. We might be able to, franchise or open another location. We might be able to, run more aggressive advertising or whatever to get more people in the door. So those are all certainly ways that we could do that. If we're working with a local market on something, we could potentially try to expand that market or go into new markets. If we have one particular vertical that we work in, say we have a product or service that services, doctors, maybe we expand and include real estate agents or attorneys or whatever. And so these are all typical ways that we look at how can we scale what we've got. And on the surface, it makes a lot of logical sense to think that way. Because look, we put together the pieces to get something up and running, to get it working, and it's working. We're actually making money. We're actually selling and generating more revenue than we have expenses. And so it makes a lot of logical sense to say, what things can we do where we can just improve them or increase them? And if we increase the inputs, maybe we'll increase the outputs. And it's certainly valid, certainly viable, and it makes total sense why people would look at it that way. But there's actually another way to look at it too. The fact is, when we do that, we are betting 100% on this one thing. So depending on our industry, depending on our company, depending on our business model, and depending on a lot of other factors that are outside of our control, if anything does go wrong, it could actually be catastrophic, because we could go from a place where we are profitable and things are going really well to all of a sudden out of business and kicking ourselves for not seeing it or foreseeing it or, wondering what happened. And it does happen, it has happened, and it will continue to happen to businesses and entrepreneurs. And it's sad, but it is a reality of sort of the market system that we live in. So maybe the best bet is, because what we have is already working, maybe instead what we want to do is find new and different revenue streams instead. So we, still grow, But instead of growing through one big entity or trying to make what we're doing bigger and better or more expansive, maybe instead we grow through diversification. So these are two sort of diametrically opposed ideas, yet they both can work. So what's the answer? What should we do as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as someone who has done, something successfully? We've got to feel really good about that. Now the question is, where do we go from here? So we have experience, we have a track record, we have the know-how, we have the resources to continue to build what we're currently doing, but obviously we've highlighted the fact that there's risks in that as well. So let's take a look at the benefits and drawbacks of each of those two approaches. So that way we can figure out whether or not which one makes the most sense for what we're doing. Is there one that's better than the other inherently? Or is it based on our particular situation, based on our particular position in the market and everything else? So we first look at growing our existing business. Some of the obvious benefits here are we get an opportunity to leverage our existing resources. So if we have a foundation in place, we have an infrastructure, whether or not it's a physical building or whatever, we probably have some systems in place, right? I mean, we know how to do the various elements that need to be done to go from whatever it is that we're creating or offering to get it into consumers' hands to get paid for that. So that whole system is already up and running, which is very powerful. That's a really great, benefit and something that it makes total sense to want to leverage that. We also have an existing customer base. So if we know our customer base, we have the opportunity to tap into them more and more. We also have the opportunity to leverage them to understand who they are and expand out to grow our customer base by finding more people that are just like them. Because we have the answers to that test. We know our customers, so we can always survey them to figure out what it is, why they do business with us, what the demographics are, what their, worries and fears and dreams and desires are, so we know who else to target to grow. We also have brand recognition. So if whatever we're doing, people are excited about it and they really like our products and services, then it makes a lot of sense to want to expand that out, because if we do that, it's going to be a lot easier to get further penetration. When we are building a brand from scratch and no one knows who we are, it takes a lot of effort to get somebody to take that initial plunge and make a purchase. But when we're in a situation where we already have brand recognition, even though we might be running into customers who haven't done business with us before, if they recognize the name, that in and of itself gives us a leg up on the competition. And we also have operational systems. We have processes in place. We may have employees or staff or technologies that help us do what we need to do. So in a lot of ways, that makes total sense. And expanding within our current business model can leverage those resources really, really well. A second benefit is that in some ways anyway, it's lower risk, right? There's generally less risk involved in expanding an existing business because we already know it's viable. We already know that it's something that there is a market for. We already know that we're good enough at doing it, that market will pay us money for what we're doing. And we already know that the money that we can receive is more than what we're spending. And so if we have those pieces in place, you can see that element of risk is actually lower, because unlike striking out into something totally new, we already know what the dynamics look like there. And so when we're doing it that way, we have a better understanding of our market and our customer needs. And so by knowing that, there's a lot less fact-finding, there's a lot less learning, there's a lot less unknown and ambiguity. It's more just the fact of how do we expand what we're doing as opposed to trying to figure something out for the first time. And so in some cases that can be very valuable. In some cases that can be a huge time, money, energy savings, and it can be something that makes it the smart and best choice. The third benefit of trying to grow what we're already doing is that we get to build on our strengths. We likely have developed some kinds of expertise and some experience. I remember years and years ago, I was talking to my brother, and he had gotten his bathroom floor redone. And he's a very handy guy, so he was considering doing it himself. But he decided, he was kind of busy at work, had a lot of other stuff going on with the family. So he decided to pay somebody to do it. So when the guy came out to do it, he was watching and he was really interested to see like how they were going to do it and everything else, because if he figured if he watched, if he ever had to do it again, or he wanted to do one of his other floors, he could do it himself. And one of the things that he noted, that it wasn't something that would have been intuitive to him right off the bat, is when he was cutting the tile or whatever was going around the base of the toilet. It was basically, a circular base on the toilet. And so it's difficult to sort of dovetail whatever you're putting in there to make it fit. And what the guy did was he cut one of the tiles on an angle, on like a 45-degree angle. So when he layered them both together, they sat flat. And I remember my brother saying, wow, I wouldn't have thought of that, but what a really great idea. That's something, the old expression is the carpenter's rule is measure twice, cut once. Because once you've cut the wood, it's too late. If you made a mistake, it's too late. So you're better off being smart, figuring out how to do it the right way in the first place, and then doing it right once, even though it might take you a little bit more time. And in every business, we're in the same situation. There are going to be things just from the process of doing business that we develop clever little shortcuts. We know what areas that we can, cheat on a little bit, or areas that we can gain a little bit of extra, speed or precision or whatever it is, advantage in one particular area or another. So the longer we've been doing that, the more expertise we're going to develop. There's a reason that master craftsmen in various industries get paid a lot more than an apprentice, because there are things that they know that are inherent to whatever craft they're doing that go above and beyond just learning the basics of how to do it. And so having that expertise, having that experience, having that sort of path dependency, if you will, for someone else to try to copy us, it makes it difficult, is very, very valuable. And in whatever industry or niche that we're in, if we then expand within that domain, we can capitalize on our strengths, and we can maybe even deepen our competitive advantage and get even better at what we're doing. So that's another really powerful advantage. And then the fourth powerful advantage is economies of scale. The fact of the matter is we all know the idea of manufacturing, right? If we create a manufacturing facility and we get all the machines in place and all the power and all the utilities set up, and we get the workforce and we crank out 10 widgets, we're going to lose a lot of money on that. Because the fact of the matter is the fixed cost right up front is going to cost us a tremendous amount. As the units that we create increase, our variable cost decreases for each unit, because we're able to leverage those economies of scale. It's the same equipment, it's the same workers, it's the same raw materials that are going into it. But now we're able to churn out a lot more. We're maximizing the value and the output of all of our other assets, while at the same time generating as much revenue generating products as we possibly can. So this is true in every business, where if we have the ability to leverage those economies of scale, then we can grow our existing business much, much faster, easier, and cheaper than we could with anything else. So this comes down to an issue of capacity. If what we're currently doing in whatever our current business is not maxed out at capacity, that's a big sort of signal that maybe the smart thing to do is grow our existing business. If, however, we're tapped out, we have to open a new manufacturing plant, or we need to hire 5 new workers in order to launch this new growth sort of idea or initiative, then maybe it's not the right thing to do, because maybe we don't really leverage those economies of scale as much anymore. But we can reduce our cost per unit and increase our profitability if we can leverage economies of scale. So all of these things make total sense and make the argument for why we would want to grow our current business. And those are the things that most people normally look at and most normally point to when they think about how do I grow, how do I scale. That's why they tend to stick with their current business. Now, let's flip the script and let's take a look at the benefits of actually adding new income streams instead. Because again, there is a risk to growing just our one main business. So the first benefit here is flat out diversification. Adding new income streams can spread our risk and make our business more resilient to market changes. Let's say that we have our main business, and let's say there's an economic downturn, or it's a seasonal business, or whatever. It's going to be harder to sell more ice cream by doubling down on the winter sales, right? I mean, winter in New England, people aren't really that interested in ice cream. In the summer, you could probably sell 10 times as much, but in the winter, not so much. So that's not going to be a great way to grow it. However, if we diversify and we add a new revenue stream and whatever, start selling hot chocolate and coffee and whatever else, then now maybe, we've tapped into something where we can actually level out that cyclical nature and seasonal nature of our revenue and get it to a point where it's a little bit more even. But we can even go beyond that and go completely outside of our normal business. We can launch a digital version of something or another digital version of something. And when we do that, if we're able to generate another revenue stream, even if our one sags a little bit, it's not going to put us out of business. We can afford to continue to finance it. It also creates options, because if we realize that sort of the writing's on the wall and this other business is sort of dying, well, we could start to shift all of our emphasis toward this other one, but we're already protected because we've already built it. If our existing business starts to fail, and now we have to scramble to figure out what to do to survive, that's a really tough place to be. If instead we've already got something else going, we can make decisions. Oh, this is a temporary downturn. Great. Infuse some capital that we're making over here, income here, and capital over there to help that survive. Then when it bounces back, great. Same thing happens over here. Now we have 3 or 4 revenue streams going, and they can all feed each other. But also the likelihood of it all turning down at one time is far less, because they're not reliant on the same market, they're not reliant on the same economic factors, they're not reliant on the same industry, and they're not reliant on the same competitors. So if one income stream falters, others can provide stability. A second benefit for additional revenue streams is expanding market reach. If we are in one silo market, then by adding new revenue streams, we can tap into different income streams that attract different customer segments, and they might address different customer needs within our market. So there's multiple benefits to that. One, we might be able to have some crossover. So we might actually be able to get some customers that we can have as customers of both. But in addition to that, as we mentioned, now if something happens to one particular market or customer base, we don't need to worry about it as much because we're not as susceptible to that. We've got another one that's going to help buoy us and keep us going. So it can help us reach a broader audience and increase our overall revenue. A third benefit of adding new revenue streams is innovation. And this is something that we might not always think about in this way, but the fact of the matter is, when we introduce income streams that are new, it means we need to require innovation and creativity to do that. What's great is we can leverage what we already know. So while we aren't benefiting directly from our manufacturing equipment or whatever, we are benefiting from our experience. And building a business is a skill in and of itself. If we know how to do it successfully once, the odds we're able to do it again are far higher. The most difficult thing is getting the first one to work. We can take what we've learned from the hard knocks we went through in our first one, apply those to the second one, and hopefully have a smoother journey. Make that a little bit more optimized, a little bit more streamlined, and do it better right from the start. And so it's going to help us innovate. It's going to help us get creative. And that can also invigorate our business and keep us in a competitive in a rapidly evolving marketplace. So that can bounce back and end up fostering innovation back in our original business. Also, if we have a staff or a company that we're working with, instead of people being complacent and or bored in the workplace, they're going to be excited because they got new stuff to work on. So that's a really great place to be. And the fourth benefit of adding new revenue streams is increased revenue potential. The fact of the matter is, unless we evaluate that there is no virtual limit, no theoretical limit to how big we can grow our current business, then there is a limit. And so knowing that, even if we hit that, that's where we stop. Whereas if we tap into multiple revenue streams, now we can hit the sort of virtual limits or theoretical limits of all of them. And that rises the overall revenue for the entire business and our entire enterprise and our entire entrepreneurial journey far, far higher. So by tapping into multiple revenue sources, we can potentially increase our overall revenue beyond what would ever be possible by just focusing solely on one business or one aspect of the business. So those four things make an argument for adding new income streams instead of growing our current one. So it just comes down to evaluating our own position and our own situation to determine what makes the most sense. So the takeaway here is that every entrepreneur wants to grow our business and our revenue. And the typical common knee-jerk idea is to build on what we've already built. There are cases where that makes sense for sure, no doubt about it, particularly if we're focused on maybe an exit strategy that's going to pay us based on its value. But it also has risks, and sometimes adding new revenue streams is actually easier because we've already decoded how to build a successful business, so it's easier to do that again and again. And this might be far smarter if we're in an industry that's volatile, that's hyper-competitive, or maybe susceptible to issues beyond our control, like technological innovation, legislation, or economic issues. In the end, we just need to decide the right path for ourselves, but it is important to consider all avenues instead of just going with the typical and most common idea.